Hello friends, this video on Biomolecules Part 7 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. So now we'll look at some of the popular monosaccharides. We will look at their structure, we'll look at some of the important properties associated with them. So some of the important monosaccharides would be glucose, fructose, glyceraldehyde. So these are some of the very popular monosaccharide, you can say. So we'll look at some of their important properties, how do their structure look like, how are they formed. So we'll start our discussion with glucose. So talking about the occurrence of glucose, it occurs freely in nature as well as in the combined form. So glucose is generally present in sweet fruits and honey. So you would have all seen that we also get that glucose packet, and we are not talking exactly about that glucose. We are talking about the monosaccharide glucose, which is present in all sweet things. That is why it is sweet in taste and it is a monosaccharide. So this is how the structure of a glucose look like, which might be quite confusing for you at the moment. But the red colored balls which are shown here, they represent the carbons. And similarly, the white ones represent the hydrogen and the black ones represent the oxygen. Most abundant organic compound on earth. So that is something important to note, that glucose is the most abundant organic compound on earth. Now let us see the preparation of glucose. How do we prepare glucose? Now just now we spoke about the process of hydrolysis. So what did we see? That if you do hydrolysis of a polysaccharide or a disaccharide, glucose can be formed, because glucose is a monosaccharide. It is the simplest unit. So it can be prepared from sucrose, which is cane sugar, and it can also be prepared from polysaccharides like starch and cellulose. So sucrose is nothing but cane sugar, that is the table sugar, which is often known as. So sucrose is a disaccharide. And starch and cellulose, they are polysaccharides. Now needless to say how glucose is prepared from each of them, by the process of hydrolysis, where disaccharide will get converted to monosaccharide. Again, polysaccharides will also get converted to monosaccharide. So let us quickly look at the preparation of glucose from cane sugar, which is also called sucrose. So this is sucrose, which has two monosaccharide units. This is one unit, this is another unit, and this is the glycosidic bond. So this, when it is hydrolyzed, that is when water is added to this, it gets broken down into two OH bonds. So this sucrose breaks down to form a glucose and a fructose. So it forms one unit of glucose and one unit of fructose. So you can also to note here is, so this process is helpful in preparation of both glucose and fructose. These two monosaccharides, glucose and fructose, they have the same chemical formula. Both of them are C6H12O6, but the arrangements are quite different. So here you can see the ring is different here, while the ring is different here. So their cyclic structures are different, but otherwise their formula remains the same, whereas sucrose is C12H22O11. So this is how glucose is formed from sucrose. Now, how is glucose prepared from starch or cellulose? Here also by the process of hydrolysis. So it is just that here there are multiple glycosidic bonds. In case of sucrose, it was just one glycosidic bond. Here there are many glycosidic linkages. So they also get broken down by repeated hydrolysis. So how the exact process happens here? Glucose is boiled with hydrochloric acid or sulfuric acid at a temperature of around 393 Kelvin under pressure. So under these circumstances, glucose is formed from starch or cellulose. Now arrangement wise, if you see starch and cellulose, as I mentioned before also, they are, the chemical formula wise, they are the same. But the arrangement is different in both of them, and the arrangement is so different that starch and cellulose are like, they have completely different properties. So when you talk about starch, it is something which can be digested, whereas if you talk about cellulose, they are quite difficult to be digested. Difficult to be digested. And as I mentioned before also, there are a couple of dissimilarities between starch and cellulose, and those dissimilarities are because of their different arrangements of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So this is how glucose can be prepared from starch and cellulose. So now you understand why I spend so much of time explaining you hydrolysis and dehydration synthesis, because if you understand that once, after that I don't need to explain that again and again. Now let us talk about the structure of glucose. You see so many structures here and they are all glucose. Now I will not get into the detail of each of these structures, but initially this and this are the open chain structure of glucose, or the open structure, and this is referred to as the cyclic structure. This one is often referred to as the half chair structure of glucose. Now how each of these structures came into picture, that we are not going to discuss here. You can refer your chemistry videos for that, because that will involve more of your chemistry concepts, so which I do not want to include here. So if you want to learn it out of your interest, you can refer chemistry videos on biomolecules. So here if you see, these are your carbon atoms which have been numbered as 1 to 6, and this is your aldehyde group. These are the polyhydroxys here. So this is the open structure of glucose, and this is the cyclic structure of glucose. So glucose is on aldohexose. Aldo because it has an aldehyde group, hexose because it has hexes for 6. So 6 is 6 carbons, and for all the sugar their name ends with OSE, like sucrose, glucose, fructose, galactose. So that OSE denotes the name of a sugar. It is also known as dextrose. So this is another name for glucose. Let us now talk about the next very common monosaccharide, that is fructose. The name fructose has been derived from fruits. That is why fruit. Fructose also has a molecular formula of C6H12O6, which is the same as glucose, and on the basis of its reactions, it was found to contain a ketonic functional group. So that is the difference from glucose. So in glucose we had an aldehyde group, but in ketone we have, but in case of fructose we have a ketone group. So that is one difference. So this is how the structure of a fructose look like. It is present in fruits. That is why the name fructose. So let us look at the preparation of fructose. So again, this also can be prepared from sucrose. So if this is sucrose, sucrose has 1 unit of glucose and 1 unit of fructose. So when you hydrolyze it in presence of an enzyme sucrase, what happens? It gives 1 unit of glucose and 1 unit of fructose. So this is how we can prepare fructose. Talking about the structure of fructose, again it has an open structure as well as a cyclic structure. So if you look at its cyclic form, we see that its cyclic structure is very similar to a compound called furan, and that is why it is also known as furanose. So this is the structure of furan, and when you look at the cyclic structure of fructose, this is the cyclic structure of fructose. So if you look at the ring, it is very similar to the compound furan, and that is why it is called furanose. So now it will be very easy for you to distinguish between glucose and fructose by looking at that cyclic structure. Whenever it is a glucose, the structure will be somewhat like this. When it is a fructose, it will be somewhat like this. So that is how you can very easily identify the cyclic structures of glucose and fructose. This is the open structure of fructose with a ketone group and polyhydroxys. And also fructose is the most water soluble sugar. So it is the solubility is maximum in case of fructose, It is abundantly found in honey and grapes, and especially the fruits. So not only sucrose, it can also be obtained from sugarcane or sugar beet. So that can also be one way of preparing fructose. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.